at 6 o'clock and ask if you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everybody. Before we start the meeting tonight, the administration wanted to make a comment in regards to some matters that were brought to our attention at the last public comments section. So, Kristen, if you have something you wanted to...
Yes, thank you. I just would like to reference the information that's been going around about the Founding Fathers. Mr. Grieve and I were made aware of some inappropriate content in a study guide that was sent home with at least one student. An email was sent by a parent to the teacher referencing this inappropriate content. And then I received another email at the beginning of December from Mr. Verville, who reached out on behalf of a constituent, so I don't know if they're the same student or not. Mr. Grieve and I investigated, and in our conversation with the teacher explained that the unit on the Constitution was covered back in September, that the students were studying to take a retake of the Constitution test, and that support staff had provided at least one student a copy of a study guide that had been created several years back, and had been in a file. The teacher did not review the study guide, so he did not see the inaccurate definition of Founding Fathers as fat, old, white, rich men who started the United States. In our investigation, the teacher explained that the definition he gives in the class is men who wrote the Constitution. The teacher also emphasizes that the Founding Fathers were some of the most brilliant men in American history, and in class with the students he examines the many virtues of the Founding Fathers. He has students do a research project on a Founding Father. They complete different projects throughout the course of the years that he's covered this information. This year, the students created a Hamilton-style rap, which the teacher presented at a school board meeting a couple months ago, highlighting the information that the students learned about their Founding Father. From this point moving forward, all copies of notes, study guides, and or tests containing the definition have been removed from circulation. Any class notes, study guides, and modified tests that are generated by support and teaching staff will be reviewed by the teacher before circulating to the students. And in classroom discussions, the Founding Fathers will not be referred to as fat, old, white, rich men who started the United States. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Moving on to the minutes of December 19th. Move adjourned.
Second.
I did have a couple of corrections.
I see one right on.
Okay. Do you want to guess?
Yeah. Number one.
Yeah. You got promoted.
So that has been taken
That
care
may
of.
not be a promotion.
Why would you want to correct that, Joe? No, that's how
That is no
That's how
promotion.
it rolls. That's corrected. In page 3, January 2nd, 2019, the money that has been withdrawn from the trust will be published in the paper. That should read that we will have an estimate for the amount of money needed, and the public hearing will be at our next meeting, which is January 19th? 16th?
2 plus 14 is 16.
Great.
What's the date again?
The 16th.
Thank you.
So tonight we will find out how much we need to do, and then we will have the public hearing at the next meeting. Any other corrections?
Yes, I have a few.
Nate?
One was a typo under the section of SNHPC. I gotta find it again. I wasn't sure what the last sentence meant. The worksheet wild is due the 3rd week of January.
What page?
This is page 1, the very last line of page 1. The worksheet wild. Does that just mean the worksheets
Would be,
are due, or would be due?
is due,
Sure.
okay, the worksheet is due the 3rd week of January.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next is a discrepancy in numbers. This is in the second page. under work ready to be scheduled, the change over to LED lighting. On the last meeting, we received a form that said 280,000. This number says 28,000.
Okay.
I'm not sure which is accurate, but I was doing my CIP work according to 280,000.
That was the estimate out of the engineering.
So is this the number that's wrong? This should be
It
280,000?
should be 280, but 280 is wrong as well.
Okay.
So
But that was the
But we
number
should just be
presented.
consistent with
that was
whichever
the
one.
number we were presented.
Okay, all right.
Okay, I have 280 then.
And then page 3, 2/3 of the way down. A motion made by Zach Langley to reduce the surplus from 75,000 to 60,000, seconded by Nate Oxnard. I don't think we voted on that one. I think I removed my second without voting on it.
Right, so there shouldn't be all in favor.
So there should not be an all in favor motion carried there, that we did not vote on that.
You're right. Okay, got that.
The other,
Oh, did you have something else in that same section there, Zach?
I was actually back to the ready to be scheduled work.
Okay.
The minutes say that we approved, all that work. We didn't approve the LED lighting.
The LED lighting, right, that is.
That was not, everything else was, the parking lot paving wasn't approved. So there's items on that list that weren't part of that, conversation, I guess. So I think we did, it was treads, it was rekeying,
new floor in the cafeteria was not approved.
no. Water heaters, I believe we did, the exhaustor that we had on there, the
So can I ask where that list came from? Because it wasn't in the tape. What list should I be looking at?
So there was a conversation around what we're ready to do now, and then there was conversation around potential work. And I know that we were all over this.
There was a handout that Kristen had, but
Right.
we can probably
We
use
can give
that.
you a copy of that.
Yeah, and I think Mike had some stuff on that list that we kind of mixed on there. So if this was a kind of a duplicate of Mike's list, there's a lot of stuff on there that we mixed. Kind of right out of the gate. And maybe we can update it might be more prudent to update the minutes so that's, and then revisit these at the next meeting, if we don't have those changes in front of us.
I think Kristen will read up the list.
It will be accurate based on our public hearing from next time, correct?
No.
No?
I just want
Or
to,
it will be ready to be, it will be, yeah, it will be
Right.
based on the public hearing, but.
but I just want, I wanna, cause I mean, this looks like we're doing some work that we have no intention of doing. Or not that we don't have it, that we're not doing now. The LED lighting, the paving of the floor, the flooring and ceiling tile.
I probably have some notes too from last
Yeah,
meeting.
I didn't bring my
I
notes
have the
with me.
work, I have a thing in here, work that has been complete, work ready to move on is the upgrade of the heating system.
Right.
Work ready to be scheduled with the stairwell, the urinals, the toilets, the exhaust hood, and replacing of the water heater that he needed to get through this.
Okay.
Can you share that with Candy? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
So do we wanna move on
Nate
those?
still has questions?
Oh, are you working on the same list still, before we move on from that?
I wanna make sure we have the list accurate, and that's why my thought would be that we maybe hold the minutes until the next meeting, unless you wanna move them with the understanding that will be.
We don't need to approve the minutes today, if you wanted to bring them back at the next meeting.
Either way, whatever.
Yeah, if we've got other changes, let's make the other changes, but I think just so this reflects what we're looking, we can leave them up as draft form. I mean, they can be published as draft form, if they're on the watermark, which they are there.
So you had other corrections?
Yeah, the NHSBA proposals, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but the list of the 10 of them, the ones that I saw were numbered here, which you have 10 to 21, they were numbered on the sheet that I got from 1 to 10. I don't know if that matters that much.
The list we looked at was, the sent in the mailing was 10 to 21, but I think the language was the same.
Okay,
One
I think it
thing
probably was,
yeah,
same language.
I don't know why they were numbered that way.
Okay, that's fine. And then on to number 11, or what you have written down as number 20. Number 20, we did not vote on number 20 because that one was moot, essentially, because that didn't make it to the deadline. So I don't believe we voted on that one.
So, this DCS board did not vote on resolution 20.
We
Right.
took no action.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
No action was taken?
Right.
Okay.
And one more item is on the calendar, which is where? School calendar H. We did not vote on that. I think we moved it and then we discussed it, but then we removed our motions and we said, can we come back to a proposal next meeting? So that all in favor motion carried should be removed. We didn't vote on that.
Okay, I got it.
That's it.
And it would have just been a request was made by Zephyr was in that case. Still going after half days.
Go for it.
Anything else?
Yeah, I was not here at the meeting.
Right.
My name was up there.
Alright. So, why don't we leave the minutes alone until our next meeting, and Kristen, you'll be able to get that to Candy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alright, before we go forward, I would like to remind the board that our meetings are recorded, and to please speak at a level that's high enough for the microphone to hear you, as the recording from last time did not catch everyone's comments. So definitely make sure you enunciate and project your voice. Public comments. No public comments. Agenda review. Any changes to the agenda? I would like to add the PTO as our PTO representative this year. Is that okay with everybody?
And if the PTO representative does not want to hang out all night, I'd be willing to pop it in
Right after this?
right after this.
We didn't have a meeting last month, so I have nothing to tell you guys until the next meeting.
Okay, there's your report.
I'm here just.
So I
As a witness.
As a fan.
I withdraw the need for the PTO to be on the agenda. Any other changes? Do we have any consent? No. Okay. So we have no consent items. Warrant articles. We are on to warrant articles.
So Kathy made the edits based on the meeting that we had last time, and the one thing that's missing from your version, there were a couple of votes missing, so they're all filled in. I think it was the last two. Did not have the school board vote of 5-0, so that's been added. Otherwise, they should be, if you just take a look, because they're gonna go to the NBC on Saturday, and we wanna make sure that we have everything accurate.
Everybody wants to take a minute and read through them. See if there's any typos.
And they've also been sent off to legal for one more review, but he did review the first draft, so it's just a couple of small, the numbers were all filled in. We bolded the section that we wanted bolded at the end.
Bolded with enthusiasm.
Yes.
This is just a question for Article 5, Patty. Do we need don't we need a higher than simple majority to create a fund? But we needed like 60%.
Actually.
So does language have to be included in that, stating that
Usually it says must be approved
60%
by.
majority?
I can ask legal.
Okay. And I'm comfortable with whatever boilerplate basically needs to be added.
Sure.
Alright, so, since we haven't voted on it, I would entertain a motion, to put on the warrant article, or the warrant ballot, to see if the Deerfield School District will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of up to $75,000 to be added to the facilities repair fund previously established. This sum to come from the June 30th, 2019 fund balance available for transfer on July 1st, 2019. No amount to be raised from taxation.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Next one, to see if Deerfield School District will vote to establish an equipment and installation expendable trust fund under the provisions of RSA 198 :20-C for the purpose of purchasing and installing equipment, and further, to raise and appropriate the sum of up to $25,000 to be placed in this fund, and to designate the school board as agents to expend from this fund. This sum to come from the June 30th, 2019 fund balance available for transfer on July 1st, 2019. No amount to be raised from taxation.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
We're good with warrant articles. Are there any other warrant articles that any board member would like to add? This is the point at which we move on from warrant articles. Okay.
We haven't had any petitions, obviously.
Not yet, no.
What's the deadline for that?
But yeah, I was gonna say the ninth too, so.
Bus Routes Committee. We tabled this from last time. This is the discussion around whether or not we want to put together a committee to continue focusing and analyzing the effectiveness of the bus routes in town. What's the wish of the board on creating a Bus Routes Committee?
I think it's a wonderful idea. I just want to make sure that we are able to affect change so that the effort doesn't go wasted when we send it all back over to Dale.
It would be nice if Dale were part of the committee. Do you think that they would have interest? Maybe
I
reach
can
out,
reach out, Kelly, sure.
see if she would be interested in a promise that it won't be 50 meetings.
And then for a logistics side of it, is that a committee that is a couple of board members, administrator or staff member, and Kelly, and would that suffice, or?
Might be worth getting somebody who can analyze it.
Is there,
It sounds like there are community members who would be interested in helping on that.
I just wanna make sure that the information that we're using is handled.
I will, reach out to Kelly, and then I'll let you know at the next meeting, and then you could when you form the committee, you should designate who the members will be and what the purpose of it will be.
Is that okay with everybody?
So what we're trying to figure out,
Well, if Kelly comes back and says she doesn't have time for it, it might be somewhat,
gotcha.
Fruitless?
well, I doubt she will do that, but, okay, it could be. We don't need to chase a committee that's not gonna have an effect,
Okay.
but I think it will, so. All right, any other comments, questions about bus routes at this point? CIP, hi, come on back up.
Thank you.
Do you have a packet? Did you get a copy of all of our stuff?
I didn't. I got a copy of this. Thank you very much.
Are these the things that I sent today?
There, it's
Yeah.
not in your packet, yep.
All right, there's a lot of empty spaces there.
That's okay.
Okay.
That's I guess why I'm here. So, for those who don't know me, I'm Cam Coleman. I'm a regional planner with the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. I'm here tonight to help answer any questions, help move this thing along. I can come back to your next meeting too, and I'm available to meet with anyone or for phone calls or anything like that as well. So, I guess.
So,
Yeah.
Nate, do you want to lead this one?
Sure. we came up with 10 different proposed projects, and really I think in many ways we were sort of shooting for the stars. They weren't all tied to growth.
Okay.
They're more things that we see as, some of them are necessary in the near term. Some of them came out of the engineering study that we did within the last year or two.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are things that we think that our students would be better served by having. And so I have one right here. Is this a mic? I think I've got a mic right here. Maybe that's not a mic.
Maybe it is.
Right. And so there's 10 of them, but they vary in all those categories. Some are more imperative in the short term. Some are more, they would help improve service, but not essential necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if there's a way that do you want to go through them one by one. I don't know what the best way to do this is.
Yeah, I mean, if the committee wants to, we can do that.
So the committee was mainly Nate and some Nate, and this is the first time that the school board had, as a body, has seen these.
Yes, I got some
Okay.
input from individuals, but this is the first time the board has seen it.
We as a board may not want to move forward with all of them,
Mm-hmm.
but we should probably just get a sense as we go through them whether or not, and also administratively get some feedback as we go through them. So you want to
Sure.
start with we have expansion 1 is the first one in the packet.
Okay, great. Expansion 1. So there's expansion 1, there's expansion 2. Both of those, in a larger kind of package sense, came from information that came from the Space Needs Committee, and essentially looking at projections of population growing over the next 10 to 20 years in the town.
Mm-hmm.
The size of the predictions varies depending on the model and depending on which body is looking at the data as expected, but there is a fair amount of consensus in that our population is not shrinking, but that will be growing over the next couple decades. What came up at our last meeting was that just the fact that we've had portables for so long essentially establishes a need right now for more short-term work, not necessarily even incorporating the growth, but really to address what is our space limitations at the moment.
Sure.
So the way we approached this was that, or the way I approached it was that the expansion 1 is really there, I think, to address our current space needs, and with a little bit of room to look at things like, are we using our administrative space, are we using our nursing space, are we using all the different space that is defined by the state Department of Ed, are we using our space as well as we could be? And we have a study that came out of the Department of Ed 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 2010, that clearly said that we were deficient in space then, comparable numbers now, if not more. So there, I think there's a clear need for that, moving forward in that.
Okay.
I tried as best as I could to kind of elaborate on the back there, some of those different, how I rated those. And again, all of this is open to, I don't know if we're going to vote or how as a board we'll decide whether my numbers are correct. I just kind of made them up. But then also number 6 and 7, I didn't really have much in the way of costs, and I'm not sure how to come up with those numbers at this point, other than we have various ways of coming up with numbers, but how accurate do they have to be? There's a fair amount of uncertainty on my part of how to do all this. And so that's what we're here for, I guess.
Do you guys have like a standard cost per square foot for educational space that you put into proposals like this?
I'm sure that's something we could look into and use some sort of model like that. But yeah, I think realistically, so like what this all comes down to is, so your deliberative session is in February, right? So we'll be going hopefully for like the next one. So you're gonna have these projects all in front of folks, residents who come up and who are shown all of these projects, and those are the folks who are gonna basically determine what's gonna be on the ballot. And if it doesn't pass muster with them, if they don't think, if the cost seems off, or if they don't think there's a good enough need, if there's not enough information to back it up, it's very likely that they're going to say, mark that down to 0. We're not going to put that on the ballot. So that just something to think about. So to answer your question, off the top of my head, no. That I'm not really sure if we do have a model that we could use. It's something I can look into. but you do need a cost estimate.
Right, I mean, I
Could-
would, sorry.
Can I take a step back and just,
Yeah.
can you, or maybe, you just said something that, maybe I'm not even clear about how this process works. My understanding of the process was that we're kind of collecting and putting what we choose to move forward to the planning board that goes onto the CIP. But then, whether or not it goes on the ballot next year or in 5 years or in 8 years is up to us. Or,
Well-
obviously petitions can go on the ballot, but,
Sure, yeah. So you're right. In the kind of
so without a plan, we wouldn't put this on the ballot without a more detailed proposal.
well,
I
to get
guess.
into the CIP itself, there needs to be some level of real detail, right?
Okay.
From then, that is used as a tool by the town and decision makers to then go forth to the voters. So I'm just trying to paint that kind of bigger picture.
Okay.
So we need all of this information to get into the CIP, then which can be used further down the road.
Okay.
But
I hope-
we're, for something like an expansion, we're talking about a multi-million-dollar project.
Right.
And in order to give an accurate number for a multi-million-dollar
You need to
project,
spend
you need to spend
10 to
50
It's
Up.
10 to 20% of the project cost is.
to get that number. And
Well-
so we're not gonna spend, we're not ready to pull the trigger
No,
on
and
spending
that
kind of money.
very well could be the case. And so what you might need is a study for this project. Instead of this, putting this forward
But this is,
in.
just to kind of touch, I thought the CIP was more about the next, 2019 to 2026, so the next 7 years,
Right.
and the potential, because 7 years from now, who knows what's going to be going on, but the planning and potential of what we would be looking and working towards, rather than the specifics of here's what the proposal is. So it kind of is. My thought was that this isn't like an outline. Like this is the outline for your progress over the next 7 years, and you work within that frame to and flesh it out as you go. Am I wrong?
I think one thing we're looking at, this is for capital improvements,
Right.
not capital projects. So capital improvements are where it's big money spending, but it's big money spending on a lot of existing infrastructure and that type of stuff. Adding onto a building is kind of an improvement, but it's really like a capital project. It's almost a standalone project to a certain degree.
Okay. So in which
Well,
case,
and
maybe
that's
this
the way,
doesn't
and that's the
belong
way I
on
look at it.
I don't know. I think it in many CIPs around the state this would be in there. But so I met with some staff in Deerfield today, and they're interested in looking at potable water for emergencies, and they have no idea what that's going to cost or what to do, what their alternatives are. So they're going to go for a study in the CIP for the next 6 years.
So do you just put in the CIP that's an expansion project and study committee?
I would suggest.
Because, I mean, you could also say it's $300 a square foot for,
20,000 square feet or whatever.
right. But
Yeah, I mean, if we can figure out a realistic cost, then I say put
But
it
you're
in
also
there.
projecting realistic costs out in construction where everything is
Right.
haywire for 7 years, which is an unrealistic thing unless you look at, today's costs off of a set of plans and then you add 5 or 10% per year.
Yeah, but that's something we can do, I guess. We look at inflation rates and construction rates.
So do you guys provide that service, or are we supposed to come to you and you're just pulling that together?
Can we just pay them to provide the service?
No, yeah, you come to us and say, this is, so what will happen is I can take this back and I can work with the folks in my office, and probably I would need to contact one of you,
Okay.
and we would work this out.
Yeah. So this is our draft. So
Yes,
your sense is something like this should be included.
I think this is a worthwhile project to put in the CIP, yeah.
Is that what everybody on the board
If-
kind of okay with?
So then the next step is that you're saying not for this deliberative, but then you're saying for the next deliberative session, next February, then these 10 projects will be in some slightly more developed form, laid out across the table, and our voters are going to look at them and say, I want to do this, I don't want to do this, I want to do this. Is that what you're saying the next step is, or at least a couple steps down the road?
It's definitely a couple steps down the road. First things first is you want you want everything that's going to be, presented at a deliberative session, already flushed out in your CIP.
Okay.
It's not something that you're going to come back to, maybe work on a little later, maybe get some more information. You want it totally flushed out.
Okay.
I hope that makes sense.
And so then the town is voting on whether or not it goes into the CIP. Essentially, the town
No.
is
No. I
think what he was trying to say is that you are going to be presenting these eventually as warrant articles ranked according to the CIP.
Yes.
And that they will be fleshed out, so this is us fleshing it out, but the town has no vote on the CIP.
Okay.
We've presented to the planning board puts it together.
Right.
And I'll say the towns I do business with that do the best with the CIP
Yeah.
is when they look at it and they project out 10 years worth of costs,
Yeah.
and they put the money in the budget,
Yeah.
and then they basically just work through that CIP, and they're always adding
Right,
the
and
years
it's
on
just a
the
tool
back half.
for them. Yeah.
And so basically, the taxpayers say, okay, we know every single year there's $200,000 worth of expenditures that is knocking, and that list is just constantly
Okay.
rotating through. If you can get it in the budget once, it kind of gets to stay in the budget.
Okay.
Although with the new default budgeting stuff, who knows what's gonna happen, but the towns that use these CIPs the best, and there's a couple I can think of, I can talk to their guys and they can say in 3 years we need this piece of equipment, in 2 years we need this piece of equipment, in 1 year we need this piece of equipment. Then you can bet on January 1st, the bid goes out because the money's in the budget, because it's been approved, or it's actually not January 1st, but March, whatever it is, after the election. But it's just, it rolls constantly inside their budgets, and it just becomes a recurring thing. It's not a warrant article, it's just
But I think,
expense.
correct me if I'm wrong, but towns that you see that do that wouldn't put something like an addition into their CIP, because it's $200,000 a year isn't gonna get you there.
Right, no, they're putting their, it's their replacement program, it's their,
It'd be things like the gym floor.
right,
or
gym floor, and it
the
could be,
roof, that kind of stuff.
it could be, some other towns will do it and they'll do like an annual funding of like CIP projects, and they will warrant article it out, but I'm more of a,
But
have a plan.
I think we all agree.
But we're
that
years away
this-
from that.
The CIP is really basically a to-do list.
Yeah, and it's a public to-do list.
It's a public to-do list, and if we have the money, we're gonna knock these out, but with the big projects like this, we would have the details, say, okay, we're ready to go with this one.
The good thing with
We
this.
put it out there as a warrant article, but we have all the information
Right,
already gathered
and what this also does is this is,
for it.
the other thing the CIPs are doing is, it's not sneaking up on you. It's not like you got up
Right.
in March and all of a sudden it's like, hey, we need a building. No, it was on a CIP, it was projected out 8 years from now that we need a building. So it's not like it tiptoed up behind you in the night.
Right.
So I'm hearing that we should keep the building on there, so you wanna talk about expansion 2?
Sure. So then expansion 2 is more tied to projections, and that's a little bit less certain. That's further off in the future if the numbers come to be. And again, if we're talking about 6 or 8 years of planning here, then in 5 or 6 years we'll have a better grasp of that and look at the trends at that point. The census will have happened and all that stuff. So this is more of an attempt at dealing with extra students if we have them. But I think also if we can plan that far in advance, then we could also get creative and tie it more closely to our educational philosophy and that sort of stuff. And who knows what kind of space would best utilize that or best work towards that. So but it's a much smaller project because we will have addressed, I think the way I have it laid out for rough costs, or at least what I was thinking, I'm not sure if I put these numbers in there, was that project 1 would be a larger project, short term, because we're clearly short on space, and so we need that. But if we could also, our current projections are in the next couple of years we're going to be having more kids. If we can have a larger building to address what we've got right now, then project 2 would be much smaller, 5 or 10 years down the road, to see whether those growth trends continue or not.
Is that somewhat along the lines of what your space needs is?
Absolutely, because we do need to come up to par, to where we are today and where we've been the last 10 years. We need to come up there for space, and then it's good that there's a plan in place for the future to start planning for any future growth.
And it gives us flexibility. By breaking it up this way, it gives us flexibility, like Nate said. If we take care of the immediate needs first, we get there, and we have this next piece getting ready for the expansion, or the continued growth, at that point, we can reevaluate, we'll have a couple more years of data, and we'll know if what we were thinking of now for
Was realistic.
was realistic, or is actually gonna happen.
You can also design accordingly, so you can design for the growth.
Exactly.
Correct. So it gives us more flexibility with that. We can either say, no, these projections didn't work, we can downsize it, we can not do it, downsize it,
They were
or,
Right.
10 years. And
Yep.
or we were,
can-
10 years. And
Yep.
yeah.
So it's pretty much a phased approach to the building expansion and, sets you up for that growth if we need it.
Okay. All right, so anything else on number 2 or
Nope, that was the idea.
number 3, gym floor?
Gym floor. I put this on here because this is something that we've been talking about for a couple of years. We put it on the warrant article last year. As a warrant article, it did not pass. However, it, to me, seems like it's tied to growth. I mean, across the town, our gym floor receives a serious heavy use, especially in the winter, with the Parks and Rec using it for basketball. All during break, there weren't any students here, but there were basketball games happening all break. Is that right? And so the town gets a lot of use out of the gym, and that's been increasing over the last several years. So to me, that's tied to growth. And
this is an easy one to knock a lot of these additional boxes out on.
yes, we could do that right now. You want to do
Because
that?
annual operation is going to be no different than the current floor. You're still going to strip and wax it once a year. So that, basically zero your annual maintenance is again, we're already doing that. So, I mean, that whole 7 side of it really is, there is no effect on annual costs because you're going to do the same maintenance we're currently doing. Box 6 is basically, it's the cost to do the job. And the last number we had was 125.
It was somewhere in that neighborhood, which was considered a very reasonable price.
Yeah, so I mean, we probably, a projected number would probably be somewhere in that 150. We'd come in below more than likely, but if we carried 150K as a CIP number, I think we'd be more than safe.
Yep.
So I mean, basically, it's your estimated cost is C, and it's 150K. It's just the cost of the project.
Okay.
Anybody got a problem with that going on the CIP?
The project?
No?
As we keep going through the boxes, what is 8? Are we to determine at this point where the funding would come from? I mean, we have, from what I understand, impact fees that would cover that. Can we check that box or not? Is that not?
Not without an affirmative vote on a ballot.
But isn't this proposed? I mean, that's how we would plan to do it or not? It's
Right.
not how we're approaching
You're
it.
thinking of how you're planning for how it would likely be
Paid for?
paid
I
for.
think
Right.
that's more of a general funds type.
Well,
Both, right?
yeah.
It could be, yeah.
And it's-
Can we spend impact fees on the floor? I don't think we could.
I would have to look at your
You'd have
impact
to,
fees.
you would have to, it has to be something that has been
Abusing the budget
abused
due to the growth
because
the
of the growth of the town, not just normal wear and tear.
Right.
So an argument could be made either way.
Yeah.
I mean, you could,
It's one of those gray areas where, yes, there are more people using it, but yes, it was gonna get used anyway.
so you could A and C that pretty easily.
Also, I would, in box 4, I would probably score C a little higher. If you're redoing your floors, you might have some long-term cost savings, even correcting a deficiency in service.
Right.
Just
I
fine.
have no point of comparison. So those should be
Yeah.
higher then.
Yeah, I mean, it's for your needs, so what it's relative, obviously, but
Okay.
And
Just
are
some
we gonna
thoughts.
score 0 on all of the master plans because it's not updated at this point?
Is no master plan?
I mean, we might have talked about this last time, but your master plan is still a living document.
Even if it's out of date?
Even if it's out of date, the planning board still looks to it for its goals.
Okay.
It very well could be in your recreation section of the master plan that this could further some goals.
Okay.
That's something I can check on too.
Alright, next one?
Sorry. So this is the point. So you would take those numbers and you would adjust those the scale of 0 to 5, or should we do that right now? If we
I think
that
you
this
would
is-
want to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my office with these, and
Yeah.
we're going to try to see how we can beef these up.
Okay.
But I would say don't be shy on your point scoring.
So make them both 5s right now?
Yeah, I'd say at least a 4
Okay.
for
Great.
at least cost savings and
Perfect.
facility.
Thank you. Okay.
Alright, so then the roof, pretty self-explanatory.
Yep. Nice. Okay.
Do we need to add any details on the
Yeah.
roof?
So if you, what we'll do is we'll attach like the engineering study and the findings from it for this specific project to this project sheet.
Okay.
That'll end up being in the
So
appendix.
you guys will do all that collating.
Yes.
Alright. So we have no idea what the roof could be 180, it could be 100, it could, depending on what needs to get done and when it needs to get done and how many years in the future, so. But it's probably
The 180 number's been the number we've had
for a while.
That's been our working number for a number of years.
Does it need to be updated?
Probably.
I mean, we can,
Like, if it's been years.
so, and again, I'll talk from the other side of the equation here is, you will always, when you call in any contractor or your supplier, and you request a number for a CIP, for a budget, it is always going to be high. I throw out numbers for my customers, for municipalities, and the first question I ask is this, you have the money or are you trying to find the money? If they're trying to find the money, you quote it less price, because you don't know how the market's gonna affect things in a year or 2 years. And that gives you a certain level of flexibility so that when the time comes that they actually have the money,
Right.
you know, you can absorb fluctuations, still show a discount, et cetera, et cetera. So we can ask a contractor to give us a rough number, but it is going to be a high, rough and dirty number
Until we're actually ready to go.
until we're ready to have it bid. And then when we start bidding it, they're gonna come out and that's when you'll have your scope of work drawn up and because the other variation to it is how you draw your scope of work is gonna dictate final cost. I mean, you can talk to most roofing guys and say, hey, how much to replace 60,000 square feet of flat roofing, and they're gonna go, $30 a square foot, or whatever that number might be.
Right.
But that's gonna be that high number until you actually put it to bid and basically commit to spending the money.
Okay.
So I mean, you can pad that up, or you guys
So
can
there's,
inflate that number.
so that's a good number to work with.
Yeah, that's it for right now.
Solar panels. You brought this up last time, Zach, it seemed like a good thing to put on the CIP.
It does. I think we definitely have, there's a lot of investigation to do. Like, this one is gonna be one that boxes 6 and 7 are gonna be affected in this. It also ties back to the previous question of the roof, because you don't put the panels on, and then after you replace the roof, they kinda go,
Right.
as a 1-2 type punch.
And your panels are eventually going to make you money.
Yes, after X amount of years, depending upon loading and then converting to LEDs at the same time, they either make you money or they break you even, right? Either way, it's a gain. I want this on the CIP, but there's a lot of work we have to do to try to figure out this. This is a more complicated project. And the other one that this gets affected by is, there's grants and stuff that come in and out of play constantly, so that's a hard one to pinpoint. So when you put stuff like this on, do you figure current grants, or do you figure it without grants, so it's a cost-only item? And then, do you seek grants if it gets to the point where it's time to actually jump on it? And how do you guys typically address that?
I mean,
Because they change year to year, obviously.
they do, but I mean, typically they would be available. I would say it would likely be a mix, but I wouldn't rule out grants for something like solar panels.
Okay. Something should be out there, obviously, at the time.
But yeah, we would need to flush this one out, definitely.
I'll try to corner that contact I made and
Okay.
see if I can get some rough estimations from them.
All right, flexible education space. This is kind of a smaller approach and thinking a little bit outside the box in regards to space needs and also the ability to be a little bit dynamic in what we've done. In the past, we've had things like greenhouses proposed. I know that things like shop space has been something that has always been kicked around this table as an interest, and as a school that has a middle school, thinking about possibility of a flexible educational space that adds to our current space, our current educational space, and also provides the opportunity to do something interesting and unique. So we had defined plans a couple of years ago for a greenhouse. Do you know about the greenhouse? Okay. And there's also been talk of other things that might. So I'd really rely on the administration if you had ideas of kind of ideal space, or how we could effectively use something that is flexible.
Like a STEM lab?
Yeah.
And it's separate from the expansion number 1 or the expansion number 2, because that's going to be more of like maybe a 5, I don't know how long it's going to take to actually bring that to fruition, but could this be a shorter, a quicker way to alleviate space and to make it flexible and accomplish a number of things?
Maybe build a building that is not a portable, but is not necessarily the huge addition that we talk about.
And a shed.
Yeah, are you thinking like a detached building? Is that
Yeah.
what? Okay. Okay.
Ones that has a shed. We need a shed. Different project on the way.
So you've seen a STEM lab.
I didn't know you meant a separate building though.
Well,
I've seen
I
them
don't
with
necessarily mean a separate building. I'd really love to see additional educational space that you guys talk about integrating different practices and different. I'm fumbling on this one.
And if you grow like the robotics program, that takes up a ton of space. And
Right.
they really want to have all the materials on hand.
Right,
to
and you're
have-
dealing with science and math and physics and everything else.
I would like to see this as a project that looks at conceptual items. What would, like Jim said, what's going to add value to the educational philosophy here? Is it a robotics program? Is it going to be an agricultural program? So if we can come up with the concepts that we want to add value to, then we could take these pieces that we want to do and work them into expansion 1 and expansion 2 to kill, to use an analogy, politically incorrect analogy, to kill multiple birds with one stone.
And there's always been kind of a holistic approach to competency-based education, where it's pulling together all these different practices. And you guys talk about that. What is the dynamic? How would that, if you could just make it happen, what would it do? So this, like I said, this is an outline at this point. So
Yeah, I would echo what you're saying. I think this project, if you can figure out your priorities and goals for this, it would be kind of best suited wrapped into the other expansions.
right, unless it could be done sooner and in a more timely fashion.
Well, even
That's redundant. I'm sorry.
even if we can do some of these things sooner,
Yeah.
what we do should still be thoughtful with the idea that we're going through a larger expansion, because we don't want to make what we do obsolete when we put the expansion on.
That's our own kind of masturbation though. I mean, and we need,
Granted.
the thing we have plenty of is land, right? I mean, maybe not all the great land, but we have land here. So if there's a way to do things, if we can get our heads outside the box, because maybe it doesn't have to be attached. Maybe you could put 4 classrooms that were separated, but still satisfied everything you need for certain things, as however you look at it. But there's got to be a way to. I mean, it's not like we don't have physical space. We just need to think outside the box. We shoehorn this building into one spot, but we still have plenty of land.
I just
60-something acres.
I just don't wanna have to redo one.
No, and that's, but we also we want it to be
So, tree houses.
sheds.
So, I'm sorry. You guys remember Sylvia?
Yes.
We right now we're going through all 10 projects that are in draft form, talking about what information we still need, the rationale behind each project, and I think are we ready for the next project?
Can I just
Oh
add
yeah.
one thing? I think that it clearly sounds like it's a little bit of sort of a vague idea at this point. But
It is.
again, coming back to this idea that if we're laying things out here, and I'm just not sure how much of a solid argument do we need right now. If we can get it on to the plan, and then that'll give us a couple years to, or a year to clarify our argument and work, have a committee and start to think about it this way. Then would this tie into? And is this as a faster product than actually the expansion number one? Could we, maybe it's just a different discussion for right now, maybe it's not a CIP discussion at this point. Can we add it to the CIP next year if we can't figure it out this year? Like, what is that's part of the
Yes.
question, what is the time frame we're dealing with here? And
Well, if you, okay, so I'm already throwing my 2 cents in, listen to me. It's a 6-year plan. If the 6 years out, that project, you'll have a guesstimate, not a real cost estimate, right? But a plan for 2020, you'd want maybe a couple of cost estimates. You'd want something more firm. And then in between, it'll vary. Can you throw in something next year? The CIP should be updated annually. It should be updated annually. So,
As in the towns I see that have the best level and stuff, and all stuff goes on, and it's just,
So that is a hypothetical, but could be a very cool project. Upper athletic field rebuild.
this is something I put on here because it comes up every so often that the sinkholes are still forming, and so it's going to take a rebuild, taking it down 15 feet and then building it back up 15 feet,
try to start digging and figure out what you got.
and in the process deal with the septic somehow.
And the size of the field is not, it doesn't really accommodate anything except baseball.
Right. So that's why there's 2 of them. One is the rebuild, which we're not really sure the scope of it until we start digging, and then the other one is the addition, because the fields that we currently offer don't fit our school sports offerings.
And again, that irony is we have 60 acres of land and no field, or not enough field.
A lot of rock though.
So
We
should
have
this,
rocks.
just to throw in a little side note, I just came from the town's Parks and Rec Committee. They would love to collaborate on a project, probably with this group, on creating additional fields. They'd love to create sort of a rec center with additional basketball courts and indoor meeting spaces. I volunteered that we would put together a survey so that the capital improvement program that they want to put forward will be based on something and not just on the 8 people or how many ever were sitting behind the table. So we're going to Cam doesn't know, he's now finding out. We're putting together a real quick survey that they're going to hopefully house on their website for probably this month, so that their future capital improvement program can point to something. Well, why, so at the deliberative session, have any of you survived the deliberative session here in Deerfield?
Every one of them.
Not me yet.
So,
Yes, I will survive.
so I'm guessing that you get the kind of personalities that go to the meetings. They want some backup information. Where did this estimate come from? What is this project based on? What is the need for the project? So that's why the survey. So they can say, well, out of the, 400 residents that filled out this survey, which would be 10% of the community, which would be great. 98% said we want more fields. You know, so just to throw out an idea. But anyway, collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, we're restricted for sports purposes that we really couldn't be off-site. So, you know,
Right, but you just said you have a lot of land.
we don't have a lot of super usable land, but there's definitely space that we
All
can do
land
things.
can be made usable.
Yes, it's just costs.
Yes.
That's true.
So the next thing is the traffic flow redesign.
I think this was tied to the increasing traffic that's overflowing onto North Road. However, the catch-22 or the knot that we find ourselves in is that redesigning or repaving anything before we start talking about a building project is obviously not a good idea. So this can't really happen. Would not be a short-term project. This would be after we make some headway with the expansion.
This is part of the first two.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Really, this
Yeah.
is
That's
this
what I
is
think.
part of the first two. I mean,
Yeah.
it's that design
Okay.
and the engineering
Yeah, would incorporate this.
would incorporate this, and it would incorporate it for phase one and phase two,
Right.
so that you can do phase one, rework it, add phase two down the road, and you're not tearing out a road because you have a building going there, and
That's right.
that's just,
So can we cancel this one?
I think this is,
Rip it out?
this
I think
ultimately,
it needs, but I do feel like the information that you have here should be said and specified in the other two. so
In
that
the
it's not-
expansions, yes.
yeah. I mean, that is part of that overall
I would
expansion.
still like to see it listed. I agree that it is a big part of the first two projects, but also what happens if those first two don't go through, or we don't get to them for
I think,
10 years?
so,
I would still like to have this listed separately so that we could deal with this separately once we have a better idea of how the first two are gonna go. If we get to the point where like, well, that's never gonna fly, we still need to address that issue. So,
so I think the police, building committee, we adjusted our approach recently, and we're gonna end up in a similar situation here, so I'll explain, if I can, very quickly, the approach we took there. And that was, this year, there's gonna be a warrant on the town ballot for the engineering and design to get that accurate cost estimates for next year's ballot to actually build a police station. And we're, at some point, gonna be in the same situation where we have to act on anything, we have to do that. And so it does put a warrant article on the ballot, which is very much a litmus test for how that police station project's gonna go. Because if that warrant article passes, at least you know there's enough, of a consensus in the community that something has to happen. I mean, that's $50,000 to do a 6,000 or 7,000 square foot building for site work, engineering, and then enough of a set of plans to have a maximum project values determined depending upon what method we go with.
Right.
And for us, I guess what I'm getting at is, for us, we're gonna be in the same thing where maybe next year we need to look at saying, okay, we need to ask for $200,000 for engineering design work, which is site work evaluation to get either, relay out the parking lot, road in, road out, where's the building gonna go, and enough of a set of plans on the building, not a full set of plans, because those would cost, a considerable amount of money, but enough of a set of plans so that we can go to a project manager, a construction manager, and say, what's our maximum build number for this structure? And so, we're a year away from being in that situation where we need to figure that out, which puts us a year away from being, construction ready in many of those cases. But just as I think it proves it up, because having that conversation with the architect at the police building committee really opened a lot of our eyes on the ways to proceed with that project and how we needed to pace through it, as opposed to immediately just trying to get the funds. He was the one who really slowed us down and said, no, get all the design work done, then go back for a warrant with your maximum project cost. And it made sense pretty clearly once we took that apart.
Right, which will grow out of your space needs. So at some point, we will have to retain somebody if we want to move forward for design purposes. All right, so do we want to leave that one separate, like Leslie was saying, or just do it like 2A or 1A?
I think it becomes part of one. That is the first.
Okay.
If we're gonna combine it, it would be in part one.
Right.
And if it starts to fail, we can break it out next year or 2 years, if we need to.
I mean, the roof is the same way.
Right.
In my mind.
Right. Well, and then there's the paving. We've already asked the town for a significant amount of money for paving, and we have it.
Right.
So that's already done. We just haven't acted on it because we're planning on where we would put something, and we don't want to pave and then tear it up. All right. Additional DCS playing fields. We already talked about that. Conversion to LED lighting. This was in the engineering study.
Right, and that was my point earlier, whether it was 280,000 or 28,000 makes a big difference. So this was, we agree that it's 280 which was what was on the engineering study?
That was the number on the engineering
Yeah.
study that I recall.
The number we have right now, but we all agree that it's not.
I think the engineer said that number is not accurate.
Okay.
So,
I will try to, within the next, I'll try to corner the solar guy and drag him over here, kicking and screaming. See if I get a guesstimate.
Okay.
so we've given you 10 things to play with. So the next step in the process is you guys will take the engineering study and these, come back to us with details in regards to what we need to fill in, and you'll fill in as much as you can.
Yes, I'll fill in as much as I can with the information I have, and I'll get back to you guys before your next meeting,
When is your next meeting?
16th.
and say this is what we still need to work on before we can get them into the CIP.
All right. Anything anyone else wants to throw at the CIP? Administration, anything you want to throw in there? You have
Shed.
You have shed.
We need a shed.
Storage shed.
I'm not kidding about the shed thing.
But it has a bullet point.
That's not a
that
CIP
says you want-
thing. We just need a shed. I walked around today. We need a shed. She shed, he shed, chair shed.
All right. Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
well, thank you very much. I don't have a card, but I can. I'm sorry. Here.
You can write your email on that.
Alright, so next on our agenda, maintenance projects. Who's speaking to maintenance projects?
Well, Kristen helps separate out the sheet, so that the top part has the updated number totaled out for 16,718. So this is the sheet you've seen before, but, she updated it so that the costs are all there on things that have been completed. If you want us to publish that number, we can do that for the public hearing, or if you want some other number, it would need to be at least this, or like, that would be the maximum. You could withdraw less.
The 16,718?
Yep, that's already been done, that's
So
been
we-
completed.
So you have to complete it and then you get the money? You can't ask for the money and then complete it?
That's a good question.
So can we ask for the 29 grand?
That's it. I'm sure, I want to check on that, because I've not done that before.
Does it feel like having multiple public hearings, like, just ask once?
Yeah, I'll find out if we can do that, I'm gonna double check on that.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure this is going to include
Should we,
the current budget.
should we do the 10K already? Or the 16, 17
Right, that's definitely.
That's coming out of the contracted
then-
services for vending.
Trish, the Honeywell, is that gone through the Honeywell stuff?
Yes,
Through the current budget, so the market fund is
right.
So the 29,718 is
Probably a real number right
already
now.
spent?
Yes, but we need it to be more accurate. You have an updated number by chance? We'll try to, if we,
Whatever that
we'll get
number
what we
So
can.
we're doing them now.
Yeah, we'll get what we can for the, to publicize, if we have to do two, we will.
Salad, which is the service.
Two hearings, you mean?
To, and we're gonna have more than one.
Yeah, we're gonna have a bunch of hearings, aren't we? Yeah, okay.
So if we say 30,000 this time, and then in another month and a half, we pull another 30,000, that's not gonna.
That's right.
So, but I guess to ask that question, if we look at the work already to be scheduled, things like, the exhaust dishwasher exhaust fan, if we get our quotes, however we get, and we know it's gonna be $6,992, because that's our price, we should be able to ask for that at the same time, just knock out more at once, right? Like, we should be cutting POs for dollar amounts, and those, if we're cutting those POs to the vendors, we should be able to.
I'm just wondering, because I've never done it, if you can withdraw money from a trust fund, if you have to spend money.
Okay.
I just wanna make sure.
Okay.
Before we do that. But I understand the question, so I'll make sure right now. And these are exact costs?
And that's the starter, which is the exact cost.
Awesome. Alright, so that's a $10,970, just for your information, for Honeywell, and the server is $4,052.97. So we'll add that into the 16,000. Oh no,
Calculator.
yeah.
So 16,718.
Yep.
Plus.
10,970,
970 plus.
4,052.97.
31,749.97. 740.97.
So do you want us to make a motion for
We would need to.
put a posting out?
We'll just publicize a public hearing, and then you'll take the vote after the
We
public
don't need
hearing.
to move the request or any of that stuff. Okay.
We will publicize that in the paper.
For the next meeting?
Yes, we should have time to get it in right away.
10 days?
7.
Are the stairwell treads, that seemed like a fixed cost, wasn't that?
He had a quote for that, for
It was-
$20,000 from Deck Tech, yeah,
They were $5,000 each.
Yeah.
yeah.
Do we wanna just include that 20,000? Or no, it's not done now,
Yeah.
because, right,
Yeah,
that's all right.
that's what I have to find
Yeah,
out.
Sorry. I digress.
Yeah. So the exhaust hood, the water heater, potential replacement, the bathroom, urinals and toilets and the sterile treads are all things that are
So-
gonna stick.
They're coming.
That'll bring us to 51,
We did a couple of them.
51, 60, 70. That'll bring us up to what, about 89,000?
And my friend, the water fountains.
Your water fountains, I know,
Thank you.
But that'll
I
bring
didn't
us,
like
that'll
that.
bring us to about 90,000 of the,
150.
yeah, so we're making strong headway. We'll still say 6 months to go basically in that. We may want to at least look at, so we have the complete, ready to move, ready to be scheduled. There should be maybe another box here of the what's next.
Yep, so if you go back, after this CIP projects,
We had it in there.
are the CIP project ideas, the foyer, the front foyer carpet, the roto-rooter, the exterior, oh, that was something we wanted to done, right? The exterior locks.
Okay, so I thought like the locks we
said yes.
said yes, so do the locks, do
The carpet thing.
the carpet thing, I think we said yes.
Yeah, probably said yes.
I think that is the,
So this is, and then, so this isn't CIP, this is just work, right? So we had, the rotor we were doing, I don't even, yeah, right, I think we were,
Yeah, we said that was just maintenance.
so I mean, that's a 1, 2, 3, so like the top 4 ones there shouldn't really be moved to like ready to be scheduled.
Well, the front foyer carpet should come, yeah, it should be part of the repair trust.
Yeah, and then the LED thing we're
Working on.
yeah, the new floor for cafeteria, we would need an estimate, I guess, for that. I was actually in there looking at that, and it does appear to have separated and split kind of right down the center. I don't know if anybody's noticed it, but I went walkabouting today, this evening, and it's got a pretty little gap there. Yeah,
So I'll get Mike to get some estimates.
okay.
And then I added the one in the parking lot upgrade.
And then the other thing we have left was still the game bathrooms, not exactly how we intend to handle those.
Yes, right.
So like I went into the one on that side, and we talked about pulling off the dividers and replacing those. The partitions in there are actually in good shape. They appear to be relatively new. I would still, I guess my thought process would be remove the partitions, repaint everything floor to ceiling when the partitions aren't there. The sinks, the actual sinks in there are fine. The fixtures can be replaced, but the sinks are fine in there. The ceiling tile is just getting aged, so I pull the tile, replace the ceiling tile grid, paint everything first, put the grid back up, so now the paint's up. You can paint up behind basically where the track is for the ceiling tile, redo the fixtures, and I would look at repainting the floor in there. It's an epoxy coated floor, but I would look at having that redone as well, because that's showing its.
Well, it looks like he's scheduled a lot of this for the February vacation.
Yeah, well, we had talked about doing it differently, and so
We
this
talked
was the
about
original
individual
number.
bathrooms.
Yeah, this is individual. Well, the gang bathrooms are those bathrooms, but we kind of told them to take a different approach to it.
To do the individual ones
To
first.
move into the individual ones, but I want a plan to start hitting gangs. And so I didn't go into all the gang bathrooms, but the one on this side, the men's room on, or the boys' room on this side, the partitions look fine, and I know those can get expensive, so. But I think if we pull them out and we can, white wall, I don't care what color, but just paint everything. Maybe re-epoxy coat the floor, then reset the fixtures. I think we can make a huge difference, and presumably all the other ones are in similar states of repair. The heater covers that are in there, repair, replace, something.
All right, we're getting lost in details right now.
Okay.
We'll make it.
Fluff and buff.
I don't know about that.
Anything else for maintenance projects? There you go.
We need a shed.
Okay, we need a shed.
A sheet.
We need a storage shed.
We need a shed. You wanna talk about that, or you don't wanna go there?
No, we can go there, sure.
So I guess one other thought is, we need a shed, and I
Storage shed.
we need a place to put stuff. There is, every spare nook and cranny and corner of this building has stuff in it, so, maybe you can ask Mike to, or you guys can investigate a structure of some sort, doesn't have to, but something that we can roll. I think I counted like 10 of those chair dolly cart things, something you can roll those off into when we're not using them, or at least like 8 of them that we don't need to have sitting in the building, and folding tables, and there's just stuff everywhere. And I suspect a lot of that stuff doesn't need to be where it is, and probably doesn't get used that frequently. In the maintenance area, there is stuff that may or may not get used every day that could be located outside. The snow blowers inside their office right now, which is I'm glad it's inside, but
Worked on this.
Is,
okay.
They store those in the shed.
so up behind the school, there is a metal shed. And then there's the
There's the
Well,
well house, right? There's the well house
wells
over there,
Yeah.
well shed, well
Yeah,
building.
above that, we store,
up behind where the kindergartens are.
Yeah.
There's a building up there. What is that building?
that is, some of it's for the generator and the
There's a,
propane.
yeah, I think
So
you're,
there's two different buildings there. Am I remembering a building that doesn't exist?
Like the red one?
Yeah.
right behind the school.
Yeah.
Yeah, that part of it is, it has the tanks, and part of it is just storage for landscaping stuff, besides the snow blowers.
Okay. Could that be replaced with a much larger metal shed?
I don't know. I'm not sure because of the,
I would ask Mike for ideas maybe,
Yeah.
but
So if we got space.
yeah,
see
like
flat
tear
space.
down that and move that, yeah.
yeah,
rebuild it much
I
bigger.
think we can gain an awful lot of interior space for a fairly small investment outside. And there's also, walking around, I took 20 minutes and just kind of wandered. We have just a lot of stuff, and there's stuff that may or may not still be needed. The rolling TV cards with the big old-fashioned TVs on them. When was the last time they were used? I mean, every room should have a projector in it now, but if we're not using them, each one of those is taking up like 6 square feet of floor space. So, if we have stuff we're not using and it can be
Makes sense.
repurposed, gone.
Are we ready to move forward with building a new shed if we don't know about this expansion?
I think that can be an independent project, and it's a small dollar amount, and I think,
I guess my question is, are you sure that you want to, where you would put it is not going to be impacted by an addition, hypothetically?
make sure it doesn't go where the addition's gonna go.
Which is why, one of the reasons why I brought up where the existing one is.
Right.
I don't think, we can't, that's towards the pond.
Yeah,
You can't build that way. So, but good point.
But could you put a shed there? If you can't build
There's
there,
already a shed there.
You can't.
but it's grandfathered, could you replace that shed, or now are you crossing the zone?
Well, shed, it depends on if you're building a shed or if you're building a structure or what. A shed is different,
Is different.
is different.
Maybe we should ask the building inspector.
Not permanent.
A shed is a non-permanent structure.
So then we can eliminate it.
Yeah, I mean, but a shed, I think, constitutes like 12 by 16, but somewhere just to put some of that stuff. There's just a lot of stuff. And I love that it's all inside and undercover. That satisfies my OCD, but I want it
But
inside undercover somewhere else.
it wouldn't be paid for by the repair fund.
No, this is just,
We put in the budget for next year, or we could just pay for it
I
in
think we
this
need
year's
to
budget?
analyze what the costs are and then
Okay.
look. But I just think that we have a lot of stuff, very limited open space.
Okay.
Anything else on maintenance before we go nuts?
I got my notes.
All right, informational items. Mr. Oxnard.
I have a couple. One is has to do with I was contacted by Co-Brown, by a representative from the board on Co-Brown, and perhaps some of us have also been contacted by them. I guess I was considering responding to it mostly because the expiration date on our contract for high school is in whatever 2 or 3 years. It's not very far away, and so I think that going into that, not that I'm saying that I want to change it, I would be fully in support of extending it for another period of time. But going into that discussion, I feel like I want to be informed as to what's out there, and so I don't know that they're contacting us to make any sort of an offer, but they phrased it as reopening a connection, and so I think we are well connected. We talk to Concord a lot. We're well coordinated with them. I don't feel like I know much about the program educationally at Co-Brown. I feel like there's a number of reasons to learn more about that school, and so I'm asking the board whether I should respond in a particular way, or whether if I were to go and meet with somebody, would somebody else here be willing to do that with me, or would it just be, I'm looking for guidance from the board on how to move forward with that.
So we have a high school team assigned roles, and I think it was me and Shelley this last time. Shelley's no longer here, so there's an open spot.
I think from a simplistic view, I think we should look at whatever options are potentially available to us. So I support that end of it.
Should we do it through do you want to be the other guy on the high school?
I'm always looking for more to do, but
Really?
I don't know. Leslie wasn't here when we made that decision. Maybe Leslie wants to be the other
We didn't
person.
fill all of Shelley's
I think initially we moved all of Shelley's into other
people.
into other people prior to what.
There was a
Leslie-
couple left, and then I took those on,
did
space
technology.
needs and technology, but,
I think we left
Do you
high
want me to
school.
bring that for the next, in 2 weeks? Good job.
Sure, or I
have
think,
it might be in the drive.
yeah.
That one
What's
right
the
there?
bottom one say?
I thought Nate, I had crossed off Shelley's name there, and Nate crossed it out of high school options.
Oh,
Is that?
you're hired.
Maybe that's why I got the perfect.
This is Shelley, just have Shelley's name.
I would be
It
willing.
was both of us last.
I'd be willing to
the open
go,
dialogue, I mean, it makes sense, I mean, we can always,
Yeah.
you know.
and I'd be willing to go and tour and talk as well, if anybody else didn't want to.
Well, if we all go, it's a meeting.
Can't do that.
Two of us
So
can
two
go.
of us can go.
I don't need to be
Nate,
the
you're
one.
already on
If
that.
you guys want to do it, you guys can
I
jump
would
into
like
it.
to do it.
Can we just have a field trip of multiple members of this
No,
board?
it has to be, well, two of us.
If you don't all go together, you're certainly welcome to go visit Cook Run.
I wanna visit.
You're not engaging in negotiations, but you have students there,
But if
so-
we're having an official meeting with them,
Right.
it has to be two.
But-
Right, if you just want a tour.
But I think just knowing that, in a number of years, we're gonna be discussing this, I think it'd be great to just start. If they're willing to open the door, I think we should at least
Have a conversation.
have a conversation, walk around, see what they have to, see what they're about.
So right now you're on there. So go, is the sense
alright.
of the board to go ahead? Seems like the sense of the board is yes,
Yes.
go ahead.
Okay. And I should contact somebody else to go.
I would
along.
like to do it as well.
Okay.
If that is okay.
And if the door is open for other people to go for
I'm sure it will be.
walk,
Okay.
I'd love to.
Schedule a couple tours.
Couple tour. I will be the tour guide, the tour scheduler there. Yes.
I'd be curious as to see what they
I know.
are about.
All right. Excellent. I had two more items. One more item came from over break, and I know that the rest of the world doesn't have break like teachers do, but I was on break for the last week and a half.
We call that vacation where I come from.
Vacation where you come from, and I ran into a community member who was very pleased about an experience with a teacher at DCS, and I wanted to mention that. The family is from the Netherlands, and they celebrated a holiday earlier in the month of December. And this teacher, who was Jimmy Audley, recognized that and celebrated and facilitated this a class-wide exposure to this holiday. And I'm not sure to what extent there was an in-class celebration of it, but certainly information went home to the various families of the classroom. Just recognizing the cultural differences, and this family felt very appreciative that Ms. Audley took that time to do that. So that was very exciting to hear about. So I wanted to pass that along. I don't know if that's appropriate or not. But,
Nice job.
Shout out.
There you go.
Tag, Zach, you want to find something for next time?
Me?
No, just kidding. But that might be. I don't know. I enjoyed hearing, and there's a lot of things. I hear a lot of stories about how our teachers are doing great things, and I think it'd be fun to acknowledge that.
I had a wonderful time at the first grade friendship luncheon with Cindy Hansen.
Very cool.
And I don't know, did Nancy Shute do Thanksgiving today?
She did?
Yeah.
Yeah, it had just snowed, so there were snowmen all over her backyard.
That's fantastic.
That's nice.
There's always so much that our teachers do that is above and beyond, which is always nice to hear.
And then on to my third item came from, I think, our meeting, either last meeting or the meeting before, where I heard in the principal report that I think it was the fifth grade sort of pilot program this year, where the math program was kind of flexibly grouped, at least going into this school year. That was what we had talked about. I went back and looked at our school board goals, just because I thought it was on there, and we did have an item where we wanted to spend the year trying to assess the result of the pilot and see whether we could collect some data to see whether that model impacted math scores, and have various kinds of data to support a decision about that way of thinking about competency education. I mean, I know that idea had come from the school last year, and I guess I was looking for information about why that was changed. I'm not sure if it was just out there 1 or 2 months, but it didn't seem like a very quick change, and I was curious for a little more information on if you guys have any of that. Is there any way you could give me a little information about why did the 5th grade kind of change that program that we had started out the year?
Most of the students, I mean, I'll definitely talk to Heidi about it, but I'm pretty sure, they're, very early on, they figured that groupings needed to happen, so it's definitely the needs of the students. The program, Heidi will tell you the program is flexible, I mean, it's definitely structured, but it's flexible enough to meet the differentiation needs of the teacher, teaching style, as well as the students.
Okay.
And so, the teachers want to live into running that program, and
Okay.
so.
Do you think you could maybe get a little more detail and talk to us about it next time?
Sure.
Because it was kind of one of our goals to look at that for a full year.
In looking at the board goals, another item on there was sort of looking at taking this year and trying to figure out what our 3-year. And I don't know if it's worth working this into a meeting, maybe in the upcoming next meeting, maybe looking at our goals and just sort of seeing how we are.
Putting them back on the table and seeing if we
Put it on the agenda next time.
we've gone midway.
But there's one item about taking the NELMS report and establishing over the course of this year what is our 3-year goal? What does it look like? What is our school program going to look like in 3 years? Using the information from the NELMS report. And I was wondering, I guess, or we could talk about it next meeting, but can we get more of a report about where we're heading? And is something like April a reasonable goal for having our 3-year plan in place for how we can address the NELMS report? I don't know. Maybe we
Talk about that next time.
Ironically though, we did meet with, today's Wednesday PD group was a continuation of the work that we had done with Lynn and me.
Okay.
Defining competency-based education in the middle school as where do we see ourselves as a middle school?
Okay.
The elementary was working on QPAs. And when Lynn Hill was here, the conversation turned towards, are we a competency-based education school or are we a competency-based reporting school? And
Okay.
so so we were trying to, Heidi Cook and I and Brian, tried to highlight what are the things that we're doing that are competency-based education. Yes, we are a reporting school, but what are we doing?
Okay.
What are you doing in your classrooms that, and so we did a continuum. I can fill you in a little more next time, because we left out the 4 more items to cover, so I can give you some data and some information on that.
Cool.
That's
Thank you.
a great topic actually, because I think we've had that discussion here before as well, and I've never really figured out where we stand.
It's just a constant conversation, right? It's a mindset, and it's it was very interesting. The case managers were with us, the IAs were with us, and it was good. So I'll report out on that next time.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other informational items?
I think we're ready to have the space needs committee do the initial presentation of our findings at the next meeting.
You'd like to be on the agenda?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we're ready to do that. Start talking about bullet points that we want to present. So we have our next meeting next Monday night, and we'll tweak what we have. So by the next meeting, we should have a fairly comprehensive presentation for what we want to do.
Excellent.
So, and then we can, as a board, we can discuss it, see if we have any other gaps we want to fill before the end of the presentation. So,
Any other information on this? All right. Public comments? Nothing? Non-public. We do need non-public for NHRSA 91-A:3 to C. I would entertain a motion to go into non-public.
Second.
Nate?
Yes.
Leslie?
Yes.
Zach?
Yes.
Jim? Yes. Ken?
yes.
At 7:30. Killing it. 7:30, we're going into non-public.